Hey, it's David Prosper with Shepherd Revolution podcast. I'm so excited. We are continuing our series, Teaching to Change Lives. And I am so excited about my guest this week. My guest has always loved being a learner and thinking outside the box. After pursuing a career in education, she realized her dream to impact learners in a way that reached their whole person. After finding Prenda and starting her own micro school, she started her own micro school. That's how dope she is. She has been able to open her mind to the possibilities that beginning to gain, and that gained some momentum and change our tomorrow's leaders in our next generation. Today, she works full-time providing opportunities for micro schools to empower as many young lives as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, cats, dogs, and rats, please welcome our next guest, Hannah Richardson. Hannah, welcome. Where's the music? Hannah, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. So excited to talk with you. And I know we've been talking about Prenda, and you've been so passionate about trauma-informed learning, social-emotional learning. Hannah, why do you feel that it's important? Do you have a direct story that correlates with it, or where did this come from to wanting to teach the next generation some trauma-informed techniques and understandings?
Absolutely. And thank you. I think I'll go back to when you said, I chose to go into education, and I chose to go into education a lot of the reasons why a lot of the listeners here probably have chosen to be an educator. Mm-hmm. It's because of those educators in their lives that made an impact on them. And going back to that purpose, and then being into the study of being a teacher and an educator, and learning about I'm pretty young, and so that wasn't too long ago, right? All the differentiation and making sure that curriculum is individualized. And I was super excited about project-based learning and using centers in my classroom. So all of this was just a build-up. And then I got into a classroom of 35 second graders.
Oh my goodness. Did they run you out of the classroom?
Thankfully, it's that beginning, and I had that mentor with me, and it was she was incredible at teaching me about classroom management, and everything it was a really great experience. And I felt there was a lot of learning happening in this classroom. When I was done, I looked back and I said, that was successful, and I saw the power of teaching. There was in some areas I couldn't reach. There were some kids I couldn't reach, and they would put their heads on their desks, or they were just getting farther and farther behind. And I saw those kids. And as a teacher and educator, if you just focus on that, sometimes you get burnt out real quick, right? But it really made an impact on me to just think about those kids. How do I reach all of them? I want them all engaged. I had this idea in my mind what a classroom would look like. And with 35 students, I just didn't have the bandwidth to reach every single one of them and to feel like, what lights this kid on fire? What's going on behind the scenes? How am I going to reach this whole child? So fast forward to, I'm having my own kids, and my family had the opportunity to bring on 4 kids from foster care, and this was through family, so it wasn't something like we chose. Really, it was we chose it because we chose to love them. And we fostered them for 5 years, trying to help support the biological family and support them through this traumatic experience, as foster care is trauma, just with that. And so really having that experience, and then diving deep into the education of that painful point of trauma and what kids go through, that childhood trauma in these systems, and learning about the capacity of the brain and being able to create neural pathways, new ways of thinking. Yeah. And I became obsessed with it. And I'm thinking, going back into the classroom, how am I going to be able to reach these kids? Because I see it right here. These are my kids. I see what they've gone through. And what am I going to reach them? How am I going to reach them? And so that's why starting a micro school really called out to me, because to me, I'm like, I can do 10 kids. I can see giving them their control over their learning. I can see them having more connection with each of these kids. I could see that this could be more successful, in my opinion, of like what real learning can happen even with a mind that has been through trauma and is a lot of the times in that fight or flight part of the brain.
Yeah, that's so like so thought-provoking and forward-thinking to not just reach the academic side of the child, but the whole child. And oftentimes we look at behaviors as symptoms, or we see it as the fruits, but we don't change the roots. And what you're saying is, before you didn't have that chance to connect with, the 35 students because your bandwidth wasn't, all there. And now having 10 and having this understanding of what you and your family directly went through with adopting and bringing in kids into your home, what would you say is the biggest hurdle you have to get through to build trust with these kids? Like, because when someone is in fight or flight, they're not using their frontal lobe, and they're not using their reasoning side to see you as a new person. They're using their fight or flight, like you mentioned. So what was the biggest hurdle you had to overcome to build trust with these learners and these kids?
That's such a great question. And one thing that stands out to me that I have been told is when a child acts out, you lean in. So they act out, you lean in, because there's some reasons behind that act out. And so I'll kind of go into a little bit of my experience working with my kids. And this is whenever my kids were going to a regular school, and the school was amazing and it was supportive and it was a great experience, but my kids were unique. And so bringing my little kindergartner and talking to her about how exciting it was to go to school, she was so excited. We're walking to school, and that moment of giving her to the teacher was the most horrifying experience. And she latched onto me screaming. And this lasted for the first month of school, and she wanted to go to school, but that she couldn't get past that point. Like, I am not safe here. Yeah. And trust is something, especially with trauma, it has to be built over a long time. And that's really frustrating for a parent or caregiver or a teacher. It's like, this kid is acting out. Like, what do I do right now? How do I fix this? And it has to be a consistent, every day, waking up, connecting with this kid. That is my sole focus. If her cup or my older son's cup is empty in any way that day, they're acting out the rest of the day. And so waking up, connecting, seeing them, asking them, like, if they are a little bit off, like, I noticed that you're a little off today. You're not yourself. Yeah. What's going on? I'm just here to talk about it. I don't jump in. I let them talk. And the same thing with my classroom, with my micro school. That was my number one focus as they walked in. Yeah. Each of those 10 kids, and I could do 10. Each of those 10 kids, I said hi. Like, I welcome them with, I'm a hugger, and so not all of my students were huggers, and so I respected that. But if it's not a hug, it's a high five. It's like, hey, I really love your shirt. How are you doing? I didn't know it. Like, you just got a haircut. Like, how's it going? Did you eat breakfast? How did you sleep? Wow. You've got to connect, because that psychology of safety, they have to feel like they are safe. They can open up. They can get out of this fight or flight emotional brain and be like, okay, I can be engaged today because I feel safe, and this is a space where I can grow.
Wow. You said that so amazing. And what I extracted from what you said, in order to teach to change lives, we need to focus on connecting. And if we're going to create the bridges where it moves past trauma, hurts, and all those wounds, we have to be consistent. So you talked about 2 C's, connecting and being consistent. Then you said, in order to feel safe, that psychological safety, that emotional safety, that physical safety, it's time and time again. And you mentioned being a hugger, like physical touch. There's a book, The Five Love Languages, and we all receive love and give love differently. And we have higher ones and lower ones, but we all need those things, right? Physical touch, and you provide that within reason, right? You put a disclaimer, because there's a lot of bad stuff out in this world. Like people, consensual touch, right? And platonic touching, that you create that safety, that I see you, I hear you, I understand you. You are, I love it. Like, this is what I'm taking away from what you said. Like, you are showing the kids that they exist. And I think in today's world, when people take their lives or just take the route of suicide or some type of unhealthy route because they're not being seen enough. So with that, like, what has been your biggest like aha moment, right? You talked about connection, you talked about consistency. What has been your biggest aha moment, like, with this new Prenda model of a micro school? How's empowerment? How's, what's that look like in your world?
The biggest aha, I've had a lot of them, a lot of aha moments, but one particular moment stood out to me when one of my students that was not my own child, he had come in a few months earlier and came in with just this idea of like, he wasn't capable. Would just sit and look at his work, his computer, when we're doing individualized time. And he would ask me for every little step of the way. And I made sure like I was there, and he knew that I cared about his progress. But after a few months, there was a time where he was just like, I've got this. And he made his own goals. He set him. He's like, I've got this. And I didn't have to, he wasn't sitting there like waiting for me to come by and make sure that he was doing his work. He was just in it. He was involved. And that's just one example. Another example is of my own biological son who didn't go through foster care. And it was really neat to see him embrace the self-directed learning and go after this Create project. He saw this balloon-powered car that he really was inspired by, and he was like, "This is dope," whatever you want to say. So he took this idea and he's like, "I want to teach the class this," and so he went and studied out all the materials he needed. And I didn't have to jump in and be like, these are the steps to make it. He figured out the steps. He wrote down the steps. He told me the materials. I got the materials. He even put the materials in the bags and laid them out for the class and got the glue, and everything was ready. This is all on him. I'm not saying that this is how it happens all the time, but that's one of those moments is like, this is empowering. This is a kid that feels free and it feels like the teacher or the caregiver has complete trust that they can that they are capable of teaching a new concept to the class. And so those moments are something that just dive deep into like, yes, like back when I was going into being a teacher and I was so obsessed over the environment and the curriculum and the project-based learning and the centers, I was so obsessed with that. And being able to step back and really look at a micro school and what the most important things that can create a successful learning environment. And like we said, connection is definitely one of them. Another one is feeling like they have the freedom to go after things that interest them, and they are capable of doing so. Like they're capable of leading a whole class, a class of 10, on something that they're really excited about, and that they can learn something and dive deep into something and have that ability and that confidence to do so. And then another one, of course, is mindset. Like you've got to have the right mindset. Like Tony Robbins says, like 80% of success is mindset, not necessarily the mechanics, the curriculum. Like those are all important things we need to have. And I feel like there's so much innovation